the show where we try to break down the big news development of the week and understand the what, why, how of that development. This week, the United States voted for a new president, but they voted for a new president on November 3rd. It is November 6th, and we don't have a result yet. To discuss both the modalities of the election, the outcome that appears to be likely, and what it means for both US and India, I'm joined by a special guest today, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, consulting editor who specializes in foreign affairs. Pramit, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we have a result yet?
Well, as you know, in America, in the past, as in 2016, as in now, any close election, especially close in terms of the electoral college votes, which rather than necessarily a popular vote, there are a number of, should we say, each party or candidate is capable of launching a large number of legal challenges. And on top of that, each state has its own structure of voting. Which allows voting to continue, or at least counting to continue well after the election day. The US Constitution, incidentally, allows counting to continue for 35 days after the election day. So you are always going to have a delayed result if there is a close election, which is very clearly the case here.
Why is it that it is a close election then? Because that would be my next question. All the pollsters seem to have predicted a pretty decisive win for Biden and for Joe Biden, the Democratic candidate, and while he has the edge and may become the president, it has not been a smooth ride.
Very true. And as happened in 2016, while the popular vote was clearly declared for the Democratic candidate, both in terms of Hillary and Joe Biden, and that has happened. In the past 8 US elections, the Democratic candidate has won the popular vote 7 times. So very clearly we know where the popular vote goes. The problem, as you know, is that the electoral college system converts the popular vote into effectively a state-by-state election in which each candidate, any candidate who wins any vote, any state by even 1 vote, wins all of the electoral college votes in that state. And then you have to reach the 270 mark. Now, the problem is getting that state-by-state results right is extraordinarily difficult because one, people are unwilling to spend or do proper polling on 50 states in America, even if it's 12 battleground states. Pennsylvania, for example, was considered the keystone state to win. And it was actually very badly polled. In the sense, the amount of polling there was quite bad, and the quality of the polling was poor. So I think that remains a constant problem in America to get those state-by-state polling right. Second, and I think this is very important in this election, the turnout has been enormous. 67% turnout in America is one of the highest turnouts in a century. This means a lot of voters who traditionally did not vote or stayed back home in 2016 clearly came out. One of the things you'll notice in a lot of polls, here, even in India, is the polls will only ask likely voters to comment and give their opinion. But if it's somebody who says, no, I haven't bothered to vote in the past 4 elections, pollsters will just say, okay, fine, move on. I'm going to go ask somebody else. But if you have a massive turnout, it indicates a large number of people who were not normal voters came out. Both sides were able to do huge turnouts. I would say Trump had the edge. He increased his vote share from about 46% in 2016 to 48% in this election. But to give you a size of the dimension of these kind of votes, Pennsylvania, as I've mentioned, an important state still being counted right now, it has about a population of about 13 million, maybe on average 7 million people, 8 million people vote, not much more than that every election. In 2016, 2.4 million people in Pennsylvania who were eligible to vote did not bother to cast a ballot, which is more than enough to win an election in Pennsylvania if you're able to get that vote out. And of that 2.4 million, over half, about 1.5, were white working class males of the variety that would traditionally vote for Donald Trump. They're the core of his base. So if he was able to turn all of those out, he would have won Pennsylvania, without any problems at all. But clearly the turnout was much larger than anybody expected, almost impossible for pollsters to catch. And I think that's thrown off a lot of numbers. There have also been a number of interesting demographic quirks in this election, notably the fact that Trump was able to get a fairly large amount of minority vote, the highest minority vote of a Republican in 60 years. Over a quarter of his electorate, of his vote share was minority vote, and I don't think pollsters I think mentally just canceled that out whenever the child showed up in the polls.
So
I'll give you
let me.
an example. A 1% change in vote share can result in as much as 15 to 20 electoral college votes swinging.
That's very interesting, Prabhat. Let me get back to the point that you made about Trump. You know, if one was to just look at it from the outside, one sees the image of United States with a president who doesn't always seem to be in control, and this is an understatement. The He seems to have mismanaged the pandemic. He has attacked every democratic institution, including the press. He is a polarizer, which also, of course, works to his benefit, but he has undermined many of the liberal principles that have guided the Constitution. One would have thought that he just would not be in the position that he is in today. What explains this 48% vote share for him and the rise in minority vote? And I assume when you're talking about minorities, you're talking about Hispanics as well as African Americans, right?
Yeah. Let's put it this way. I mean, this is, I would just say, my theory. It's been relatively clear that there has been a growing division between the so-called coastal elites of America, the ones who dominate on the Pacific and the Atlantic coasts and the big metropolitan cities across the country, and the rural, small-town, working-class population of the United States. In particularly, the white working-class population has seen their incomes, lifestyle decline dramatically over the past 20 years. And there has been a remarkable lack of any response, if you wish, from the elite system, which has basically said, whether Republican or Democrat, which has basically said that we will continue the policies that we've always done, because America as a whole seems to be doing well, even though a large chunk of the population, and this includes both minorities and whites, was slowly getting poorer and poorer. If you wish to put it this way, the establishment was losing legitimacy. It was becoming nothing more than an elite. Establishments that lose legitimacy, I just call it, they just become elites. At which point a version of class division begins in America. And this is important. Class has never been a major factor in American politics. So little, in fact, that until 2016, pollsters did not include class as an issue as a measure or matrix of calculating voters. It didn't seem to make any difference. That seems to have now definitely occurred, and this class, if you wish, or this group of people who are who've become anti-establishment more than anything else, voted for Obama in two elections because they saw Obama as an outsider, among other reasons because he was black. So you actually had about 9 million white voters voted for Obama, even though about half of them, by most of the polling evidence we have, were actually racist in their thinking. But they said, it's okay, even though he's black, more important than anything else, he's not a member of the establishment. Hillary, however, was the perfect establishment figure. And that same 9 million then defected from Obama to Trump in 2016. Trump, as I would argue, if we'll see later when the numbers are more closely analyzed, expanded this to incorporate minority voters who are now becoming anti-establishment. The figures are not out in public, but I was talking to some of my pollster friends in America, and they said, actually, what we're looking at when we're analyzing the minority votes who voted for Trump, a lot of them seem to be very similar in their income and lifestyle patterns to the white working class vote that Trump has already depends on. So you have a narrative now in the United States among this class, which is now almost impervious to the kind of things you're talking about, whether it's the pandemic, his terrible record in terms of governance, in other issues, his total disinterest in maintaining almost any variety of moral or ethical standards of the system, And they basically just discount that because for him, for them, it's ultimately his anti-establishment message and background that matters. And the more the media, the more the establishment went after him, the stronger that position became, to the point that I would argue it's now infected a degree of the minority vote as well.
That's it's very interesting that class resentment has become a potent political issue in the US. And over the last two elections, it's the right which has been able to leverage this class resentment, and it's not the left, which is of course we know quite weak. Let me move to Joe Biden, because while we've been discussing Trump, the most likely president of the United States now is Joe Biden. What is it that he needs to officially become the president? Just a win in Arizona and Nevada, or is there another pathway for him?
Look, Arizona, even I mean the 253, sorry, 26, the 250, 263 numbers that you see already include Arizona. Arizona, he won, has now gone for a recount. A lot of the websites continue to include Arizona because recounts in America or in most places almost never in America changed the result. So it's assumed he has Arizona. So you're now looking at Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia,
Georgia.
Pennsylvania. Yeah. So these are and Pennsylvania, of course. He has to win only one of these states to get to the 270 mark. Nevada, which is the smallest in terms of electoral college votes, 6, is enough to make him 270 because he goes from 264 to 270. So he has to win any of these 4 states. And right now, he leads in Nevada. He is basically neck and neck in Georgia. He probably will not win North Carolina. Pennsylvania has still too many votes for anybody to count, but everybody's looking at the counties which are still delivering votes. Most of them are Democratic. So it's assumed that Pennsylvania is also going to be in his pocket. So you're looking at 4 states, 3 of which he is favored. He has a very good chance of winning, but he has to win only 1. Trump, on the other hand, has to win all 4, which is why the assumption is that Biden has the advantage. And it is also why Trump is launching so many lawsuits, either to demand recounts and try to get the courts to stop the counting process, because he assumes that the more votes that come in, the more likely the small, thin margins of victory he has. I mean, I think it is Georgia or North Carolina, he has barely 1,200 votes lead, which is nothing. So he has to. If he can stop that right now, he would win a couple of those states, which he right now has no chance of doing. Oh, future.
We'll bring you back to discuss what the Biden presidency means for the US and for US-India relations in the world. But I want to end with something that you just spoke about. Because of these legal challenges, do you think there is going to be a challenge in the transfer of power? We have seen that the democratic tradition, and democratic with a small d here, tradition has been of smooth transitions, and that's something that we do in India quite well. Elections happen, the incumbent loses, leaves office. That's something that seems not very likely in the US this time around. Are we going to see a real political, legal, constitutional crisis on the question of transfer of power?
I don't see the law and order side of it as an issue right now, because while Trump has made various unsubtle calls for his people to at least demonstrate, to come out in front of the polling stations, we've seen very little response. I've forgotten, one of the news agencies carried out a bunch of focus group meetings with voters in Florida, for example, a swing state that eventually went to Trump. And even among the Trump supporters, when they were asked, they said, no, if he loses, he has to accept the loss. That's the way it works. There's a very strongly entrenched belief that will remain. So I don't see there being able to, and he doesn't actually, I don't think that takes it seriously, think that he can go off and storm polling booths. I mean, how does that even work? Because in America, as you know, every state has its own electoral machinery system. And like the Indian system, where it is one centralized body, in America, there's literally 51, because we include Washington, D.C., 51 different election structures, machine systems, and each of them is different. because the Constitution in America does not require them all to be the same. So you have a very different structure. It's very, therefore, incredibly decentralized, very difficult to capture, if you wish. So that's why he's turning to his lawyers. But the problem with his, again, on the legal side, what is he attacking on? He's asking for access to the counting plates, but he already has access. Just as in India, all election booths and machines, everybody, each party has the right to put in a representative. All he can ask is that they move from one part of the room to right next to the table. Every judge he's gone to on this has said, no, you already have access, you don't get anything more. So he's asked for counting to be shut. There's a very strong judicial instinct in America that has never been violated, no matter which party or which one of the ideological color of the Supreme Court or the courts, that every ballot that is cast must be counted. You can review the process after the counting, but you can never stop the counting. Ballots that are cast must be counted. And third, he's therefore then now going to move to the idea of fraud and ask for that review. He hasn't got to that yet because he can ask for recounts. That's perfectly legitimate, but it does. Nobody, as everybody knows, has never changed the outcome. So his only hope is then to try to force a federal court or a state Supreme Court to pass a judgment that yes, maybe something is wrong here and it needs to be gone through. But keep in mind, as I mentioned, 4 states he has to win. And he then, are he really going to get lawsuits in 4 states to come and change and ask for a review? He asked the Supreme Court to directly intervene. The Supreme Court is kept completely silent because the Supreme Court cannot intervene directly. It must wait for the lower courts to pass judgments. It must work its way up. Only then the Supreme Court can maybe decide whether or not it's worth bringing. The President of the United States or no American can directly ask the Supreme Court to intervene in anything.
Thank you so much, Robert. I think that was very useful. And the sense that I am leaving this conversation with is that Biden is ahead, will make it, but it has not been a smooth ride. Trump is down, but he's not entirely out. Even if he doesn't become president, he is representing impulses which are going to stay in US politics and going to influence the Republicans for sure in years to come. There are issues and there are legal challenges, but eventually the transition to a new administration should happen sooner than later. Thank you so much, Pramit, for joining us. And please join us for the next edition of HT Explains.
Thank you.